What type of changes have you been making with your customers?
In tech, the only constant is change, right? So I guess there's a little bit of a given when you're working in tech that things are going to move fast. But if you look at things like remanufactured technology, that can be a separate route, a separate supply chain, and that can form a really powerful plan B in times of uncertainty.
We all need to find that solution for our customers. So
You can't assume that just that things were straightforward and simple in the past, that they will continue to be so. Beyond just having a plan B, you've got to think about the cultural impacts of that. You've got to think about having the right people around you to respond in those difficult situations.
what can they actually control and what they can't? Ultimately, we want to win new business. We're two tech CEOs talking about navigating the speed of change in the technology industry. This comes from the impact of tariffs, changing supply chains, opportunities with sustainability, getting the best value, but also, most importantly, winning new business. We're going to have an open, honest discussion, really sharing a bit different perspectives from our experiences in our businesses. I'm here with Anthony Levy, who started his business 17 years ago in a financial recession. All great businesses start in tough economic times, they say, and you've done very well. I mean, rapid growth, international expansion, and you've gone through some challenging times. So thinking about Brexit, COVID, supply chain shocks, and a hell of a lot of political change. And you're representing Circularity First, who's really focusing on profitable outcomes with sustainability and technology.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be here and to be talking about how to thrive in times of uncertainty. Look, you've been on a pretty powerful journey yourself. 20 years in the tech industry, you've worked across software, distribution, telco, and IT services. You successfully led, I think it's 2 exits, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And now you're into Smart CT, which is a business that focuses on IT services and solutions across all of Europe. An award-winning organization. It's great to share this platform with you and really to dig into what it's like to run businesses like this.
Yeah, absolutely excited. So it's great to be here with you. So, episode 1, managing uncertainty in the tech industry. Uncertainty is coming from the speed of change. We could say AI. We've all been listening to that and then experiencing it in our own businesses. But tariffs, changing supply chains, sustainability, the uncertainty around geopolitics. I think we're probably quite thankful in the UK that it's not right at our door, but it's a really important part of the UK, Europe, and the US. But that does impact confidence, and confidence impacts decision making. That therefore impacts winning new business. What we learned from the pandemic was we've really got to have options. So, Anthony, how are you dealing with this? In your business with your customers to win?
That's such a good question. And I remember early in my career, someone saying to me, in tech, the only constant is change, right? So I guess there's a little bit of a given when you're working in tech that things are going to move fast. When I think about what we're doing with our customers, I think it's really interesting to think about making sure people have enough options. Because in terms of uncertainty, you always need that plan B, a different approach. You can't assume that just that things were straightforward and simple in the past, that they will continue to be so. You talked about tariffs in the introduction. Just recently, we've seen some of the wobbles we saw during COVID, like supply chain shocks and things like that, sort of reoccur because people sort of worried, well, can I get my products into America, or what's the effect of the products that I buy from China? When we work with our customers, we make sure they have that plan B. So, for example, if you're used to buying brand new technology, that is one supply chain. That is one route from the manufacturer to your door. But if you look at things like remanufactured technology, that can be a separate route, a separate supply chain, and that can form a really powerful plan B in times of uncertainty.
And how are you seeing the difference between some of those macroeconomic behaviours to some things that how that filters down into your market, your customers, and your regions?
I think separating those two is really important. So the macro stuff, it can create really big shocks to your business, but you sort of have to watch them until they become sort of a big enough effect, or you're certain enough what's going to happen that you can take action. We talk a lot about in our business of thinking slowly but acting fast. So like during COVID, and we know the world's shutting down, that's the kind of shock that's going to affect everyone. It's going to be really meaningful. So you've got to act quickly in those moments. But equally, those are, to your point, there's those micro things, the things that are very specific to you or your industry. And I think you've, as a business, beyond just having a plan B, you've got to think about the cultural impacts of that. You've got to think about having the right people around you to respond in those difficult situations.
And if you think about that, uncertainty can sometimes slow down the sales cycle. What type of changes have you been making with your customers?
That's such a good point. And again, we were talking about this earlier, that it doesn't take a lot to sort of spook customers, particularly in our space. I think we both work with quite large projects with customers. These are big investments, and they have lots of different decision makers involved in the process. So people start to get spooked by even things like interest rate increases or tariffs, even a sort of economic slowdown. People can hesitate. I think everyone wants to go after these big projects. It's important to work with customers on everything they need. Keep doing the transactional business, keep delivering well for them, building trust, and make sure you've got access to all those different decision makers. You understand what's going on for them, and you can sort of play back, those risks, how you see them, but also, how you can provide some of the alternatives that can help them soften the blow from some of these risks that are coming.
You could say kind of control what you can control, and understanding what the decision makers are having in your customer, what can they actually control and what they can't, and perhaps bringing that perspective really is, what you're saying.
I think that's a really important point. But I'm also interested, from your perspective. I'm a privately funded business. You're backed by a PE organization. How do they approach risk and uncertainty? What kind of different perspectives do they bring to you or ask you in order to manage these challenges?
Well, I think the beauty of being backed by investors who have got lots of other businesses, they're seeing it in different angles. So they're seeing it in completely different, maybe non-tech sector, or maybe in a similar tech sector, but not necessarily completely services focused. So it's great that they can kind of give that experience of what they've been through, multiple economic cycles, but those different environments and different learnings they can share. And it's a bit of, keep you cool and focus on what you can control and influence, but also looking at how you pivot in times, because some uncertainty makes you be a bit more creative and offer up new ideas. Ultimately, we want to win new business, and just finding some opportunities in that uncertainty can be very helpful.
No, I agree. And actually, things like COVID ultimately end up being quite good for parts of the tech industry, at least for a period of time. So the whole recovery period was a real boom, I think, for the tech industry, although I think people are kind of seeing the rebalancing of that now. But as I said before, we're starting to see some of those same shocks kind of creep back in. So I think it's interesting times to think about your approach to risk and uncertainty.
And looking at your business, and similar to business I run, is that you've got lots of customers in similar environments. So I imagine you're hearing lots of things from different customers that you can advise them all on as well.
Yeah, I think, and the consulting side of our business is very much about that. It's you learn a lot by actually doing the work, and you can share that with other customers. It is interesting to see that lots of different approaches to risk in the market. But as we'll get onto in subsequent episodes, risk is one part of the equation, but top of the tree people worry about is things like cost. And that they're willing to prevent risk to a degree, but often their top priority is cost.
So if we can think of the kind of summarising it, really is control what you can control, look and share about those risks and how you minimise those. But ultimately, we all need to win. We all need to find that solution for our customers. So it's the devil's in the detail, as they say.
Absolutely, and always have a plan B.